The last time we visited with Brandon Santo was early December, and he was working hard in a movement called the Million Gay March. Fast forward to today, and a ton of things has changed. We're pleased that Brandon is able to come back on the show and catch us up on some very important matters. Brandon has recently founded a grassroots organization called the Grassroots Equality Network. We'll talk about that and a lot more. Please help me welcome Mr. Brandon Santo back to the show. Welcome back, Brandon.
Thanks for having me back.
All right, let's jump right into it. Can you catch us up quickly on the Million Gay March on June 28, 2009, and also what is going on in California regarding the marriage issue?
Well, Million Gay March on June 28th has gained a lot of exposure across the country. There's about 8 states signed on to hold large events there, and we're working with Pride events in another 5 states to have action centers and things set up there to let people know how they can get involved in helping for the fight. As for the marriage issue in California, on March 5th, there was the Supreme Court heard the oral arguments against Proposition 8, and we're not holding our breath that they're going to overturn Proposition 8 just because of the way that the arguments went, but we're prepared. We're already working on a new ballot initiative to try and put it back to the voters in 2010.
Now, this has been an incredible last couple of weeks or so for the issue of gay marriage nationwide. We got Iowa, New Hampshire, Vermont, Washington, D.C., those states have all had some huge gains in the fight to recognize gay marriage. Brandon, what does this say to you?
Well, just the fact that it's not just that they passed the marriage in those states, but in Iowa it was a unanimous decision by their Supreme Court, which says a lot for what the issue means. For them to be completely unanimous in saying that this is a civil rights issue, this is an equal rights protection issue, that was what was so big about that. And in Vermont, they actually voted on it. The governor vetoed it, and then they voted on it again and overrode the governor's veto. So again, those just say how big of an issue it really is.
How do you think this will all play out across the nation? I mean, I think that before the expiration of Obama's first term, I think we're going to see 25 states in the United States that have legalized gay marriage.
Well, the problem with that is a lot of these states 37 of the states have a constitutional amendment. And it's a lot harder to undo a constitutional amendment for states than it is to just have the legislature vote on it or have the people vote on it. So it's going to be a lot harder to overturn it in a lot of these states, except unless we make it so Obama repeals the Defense of Marriage Act. If that happens, and then it could really push it forward. There's also the D.C. decision when the D.C. Council voted unanimously to recognize gay marriages from other states. That can push it in to the U.S. Congress actually looking at it, and it could become a national issue that could be seen before the Supreme Court. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways that it could happen, but until DOMA is repealed, it's really unlikely that it can happen in all these states.
Now, according to the New York Times and other sources, New York Governor David Paterson is planning on introducing a bill that would legalize gay marriage in New York. I mean, there seems to be some real momentum here nationwide. In New Jersey, Governor Corzine said by the year's end he will sign a bill which legalizes gay marriage. It seems that the tide is kind of shifting in your favor.
Absolutely. I mean, it really, this movement has gained so much momentum in the past 6 months, and it's really surprising how much is going on.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's because we have a new Obama administration in office, or do you think that the people are now just coming to understand, just like they did back in the 60s with black civil rights, just how important this is? Why do you think all of a sudden now we're seeing these type of results?
Well, I think part of it has to do with, I mean, this has been going on for over 40 years, the struggle for equal rights. And it's come to that boiling point now. When Proposition 8 passed in California, it really fired everybody up across the country because they didn't think it would happen here. So when it happened in California, it really fired everybody up and really put it right out there in the front. So, I mean, it's definitely a big issue now.
Now, while this is all happening, you have conservatives that are claiming that this is against the will of the people.
If they listen to the will of the people when it has to do with equal rights, then slavery wouldn't have ended, interracial marriage wouldn't have ended. There's a lot of stuff that the will of the people is not necessarily correct.
But they say that, I mean, Americans, for the most part, this is what I don't understand, is because if you look at the polls, Americans are for gay rights. They're for gays to have access to government benefits, equal protection of the law. But when it comes to gay marriage, they're not willing to. The polls that I've seen indicate that at least over a little bit more than a majority of Americans are against gay marriage. It's very, very close, but I just don't understand how, we as a society would want equal rights for gays but accept marriage.
Well, it comes down to the religious issue of marriage. I mean, a lot of people look at marriage as a religious issue, but truly once the government attached a set of rights to the word marriage, it stopped being about religion. It started being about equal protection. And civil unions in these states that do have civil unions and domestic partnerships don't comprise the total amount of rights that you need. I mean, there's 1,138 federal rights that are not granted even to states with civil unions. So there's so much that is not being given there to the gay population, even with civil unions.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think under civil unions in some states, a partner does not have the right to make medical decisions on behalf of their ailing partner, and in many cases, states are forced to go to the families of the sick person, who often, many times, they're not on good speaking terms, and it's just that's one of the examples of just the problems with civil unions, just allowing civil unions, which coincidentally in New Jersey we have civil unions in this state,
and we have domestic partnerships here in California too, but the problem with that is when you transfer over state lines, you have to bring a stack of paperwork with you to show that that's your legal partner. Because of the Defense of Marriage Act, these things don't go over state lines. And since there's no federal domestic partnership program, you don't get the federal rights still. You can't sponsor your partner if they're from another country. I mean, there's a lot of issues that come into it because of just it being different. It's not the same. People think it's the same, but it's not the same.
All right, I want to take a second to ask you if you're familiar with this big hubbub that happened last week in the world of mixed martial arts. I also do a radio show about mixed martial arts, so I'm quite familiar with this. Last week, the president of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, a man named Dana White, released a video where he called an unnamed source in an article that was critical of his organization's practices a gay slur, certainly not fit for radio. GLAAD, the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, forced an apology out of White. Did you hear about this at all?
Yeah, I actually did watch that video. And the funny thing about that is that's not the only thing he said that was extremely offensive in that video. I mean, he was just going off completely crazy, using a lot of things that aren't fit for radio.
Do you think our culture tolerates such language and such derogatory terms towards women and mainly towards gays?
I think there's people that are really uncomfortable with it, but there's definitely a lot more tolerance than there should be for that type of stuff.
And if the use of the N-word, I think, is pretty much forbidden under any circumstances. I mean, rappers use the word, granted, but you cannot call an African-American the N-word under any circumstances. Do you think there'll ever be a point in this country's history or in this country where the use of the F-word pertaining to gays would be basically the equivalent of the N-word when it comes to blacks?
It's possible, but I think there's years down the line. There's still so much animosity towards the gay community that I think it's going to be a long time before they completely look at it the same way that they do the N-word.
All right, I want to switch gears here and hit on some issues that are going on in the military right now. According to our best research estimates, there are roughly 65,000 gay people serving in the military, and we have that policy, as you know, don't ask, don't tell, in place. Now, since the adoption of that policy, don't ask, don't tell, over 12,000 gay people have been booted from the armed forces, including 800 people deemed mission critical. Has the time to get rid of this don't ask, don't tell policy come upon us? Because I know that Obama had talked about repealing this policy, but really hasn't done so far.
Well, I absolutely think it's time to repeal don't ask, don't tell. That's one of the major issues that we need to focus on a national level. Obama talks about increasing the troop size by 30,000, and yet there's a whole 10% of the population that's being forbidden to serve openly in the military. And not only that, 100 of the top generals have come out and said that don't ask, don't tell needs to be repealed. But yet Robert Gates is still saying that that's not their number one priority, that they're not focusing on that right now. And we're trying to get them to focus on that.